This is NDTV, and you're watching NDTV Profit.
Thanks everyone for joining me on the Realty Debate. I'm sure each one of you watching the show today has been frustrated with the condition of roads in your city. Not once, but many times over. Potholes, jams, flooding, all common phenomena we've all learned to cope with in this country. And what's more, we shell out the top dollars for an apartment and homes in cities where road condition remains dismal. Why? Because we have no other choice. The contrast becomes even more stark if you've just returned from visiting another country. Today, on the show, we're going to map out the road development challenge of India. Of course, roads are getting built, but why is the progress so painfully slow? And what about the basic quality of roads? Why can't we get that right, fix it? My panel today is India's top names in road and infrastructure development. Let me introduce you. On the discussion, we will place the pre-recorded views of A.K. Upadhyay, Secretary, Road Transport Highways Chairman, NHAI, and Mukund Sapre, ED, ILNFS Transportation, live with me. From the Bangalore studio, Arun Kumar Sharma, CEO, GMR Highways. From our Mumbai studio, we'll have the viewpoint of Russell Waugh, Managing Director, Leighton Welspun Contractors, who's got a lot of international experience as well. Ajay Dsouza, Director, Crisil Research, will also be joining us from the Mumbai studio. For on-ground reality of what's happening to our cities and its roads, we will be joined by Praveen Kumar, Chief Administrator of Huda, and Sameer Jasuja, always with his unique perspective on real estate, with infrastructure in the studio here with me. Before I actually go down to asking my panel the questions, I think the first thing is to set some perspective. All of us deal with it, but look at the statistics. In India, over 87% of passengers and over 65% of freight travelers are on roads. These are NHAI figures. Passenger and freight traffic has grown to 200 times since 1951. In the same period, road length has increased only 8 or 7-fold. That's a McKinsey report. Up to the basic required standards in most parts of the country. Only 15% of India's roads are highways and only 0.5% of roads are 2 or 4-lane roads. If you look at the National Highway Network, it's about 71,772 kilometers, which is only 1.7% of the total length of roads, but carries over 40% of the total traffic. That's a Planning Commission report, latest 2012. India built about 1,800 kilometers of road in the fiscal year 2010-11. That was about 5 kilometers a day average compared to what the minister said 3 years ago, which is 20 kilometers a day. It was a simple target, 20 kilometers of roads a day to be built, but hasn't been met. So what's going on? I started by asking Mr. Upadhyay just that. Why has the target been missed and by that much?
I don't agree. Target is not far from reality. When we talk about the completed length, we should not confine ourselves only to NHDP. You are aware that besides NHDP, government also implements a very large program under left-wing extremist areas. We also implement a very large program for northeast areas. And besides that, in the normal our ministry's plan activity under what we call NH original, National Highway Original Plan outlays, we do some strengthening of roads and widening of roads. That is also counted as new addition. So taken that all together, today we are at the level of 13-14 kilometers a day. So therefore reaching 20 kilometers a day, I expect that I'm very sure that starting fiscal 2014, we should be at the level of completing 20 kilometers a day.
Arun, what's your viewpoint? We heard Mr. Upadhyay saying that don't take the target not being met because it was not just new roads. There was a lot of work which went in repair work, in broadening roads as well. But here we were talking about a target of new roads of 20 kilometers a day, which this country needs. So it is a target missed, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a target which was committed by the minister, but it takes time to achieve that target. Last year was the first year when NHAI awarded projects almost meeting the target of 20 kilometers a day. but this requires 2.5 years to 3 years to complete those projects. So unless the award of the projects is consistently done over next 3-4 years, this 20 kilometers a day can never be achieved. So this year also the target has been more than 20 kilometers a day for award. So that is one area that consistently NHA has to award the projects for 8,000 kilometers a year, and then we can see results sometime in 2014 onwards to achieve this target. It's not possible immediately.
Okay.
And then there are other factors which are there, which we can deliberate later.
All right. So you're saying that it's catching steam. It's not as if you can do it from the day the minister announces. NHAI, if it gives out contracts for 20 kilometers a day, then you will actually see that development happening. I also got the views of Mr. Sapre, Mukund Sapre of ILNFS, and he seems to be actually quite comfortable with the way the road development work is happening right now.
Actually, if you would see that road sector is the sector which has really moved on in terms of privatization. Things have happened, but the parameters saying 12 kilometers per day or 20 kilometers per day is something subjective, that what are we talking about. But if you take the performance that last year, in spite of all negative talk for the sector, for the country and all, they could perform around 7,000 kilometers. So I believe the key thing is the preparatory work what NHAI needs to do for bringing the bids out. As long as they are in control of those DPRs flowing on, I think that's possible, something what they are talking of around 8,500, 9,000 kilometers, which should be feasible on the ground. Issues are, one is land acquisition. Again, I would say that land acquisition as far as roads are concerned is something which has not run into too much of controversies, because villagers are also willing to give their land for the road, and the intent of use of road is very clear. So that way, I don't see land acquisition also posing lots of problems for road part of it. So that way it's a settled sector, road sector I would say, and we can believe. But again, I would not like to go into quantification of whether 20 kilometers awarded or 20 kilometers implemented. But if they are setting target around 9,500, that's the latest one which I heard. I think they should be somewhere near, because last year, in spite of things not happening, they could touch 7,000.
Right. Ajay, what's your point of view? I mean, it seems to me that the key lies in the hands of NHAI. If they award the contracts, then there is wherewithal within the system to actually go ahead and deliver that 20 kilometers a day road. It's not an unrealistic target at all.
Not at all. In fact, if you see the past track record, we very clearly seen that in 2011-12, we've had about 7,200 kilometers of award that has happened. And if you want to achieve a target of or implementation of about 20 kilometers per day, you need to have this consistency of about 7,500 kilometers being awarded consistently over the 3-year period. And I believe once that happens, you will see the 20 kilometers awarding. And our view at Crisil is that if we see this over the next 3 years, we'll possibly see a 20 kilometers awarding per day on somewhere in 2014-15 in terms of implementation.
Russell, what's your point of view? You think Indian economy, the government, the system, the companies themselves, because you work very closely with Indian companies, is geared enough to not just deliver 20 kilometers a day, but should actually up the target?
I think the industry is geared up to deliver 20 kilometres a day, and it can probably deliver more. What we've got to see is those projects flow out steadily and consistently so that contractors can take them on board and actually construct. At the moment, the flow of roads the flow of projects is not really matching the available capability of the industry, and that in itself is creating a lot of competition in the industry, but that competition can reach unhealthy levels if there's not enough projects there to serve what the industry is geared up for.
Actually, you've touched upon a very interesting point, and I'm going to visit that a little later in terms of just the competitive bidding which is happening right now, which essentially is creating a lot of problems within the private players themselves. But a very interesting point, Praveen, land acquisition. I think this is a big one for road development. You can talk about 20 kilometers, you can up the targets, but it's not that easy. That's the biggest roadblock. You're facing that in Dwarka Expressway. There are pockets of litigation, and the process is possible, but it's very slow and painful.
It's not a question. The present Land Acquisition Act is very clear as far as the point is, it is always public utilities are concerned. Basically, there would always be, whenever you build a road, there would be something coming on the way. It is not that all the land is going to be vacant. So saying that the land acquisition and anything on the way is a problem is not the realistic assessment of things. The point is that it is always possible. All the courts or all the law basically says that all the people who are affected should be reasonably rehabilitated. That should be the plan. Once you have that plan in place and you acquire land and you give them a suitable alternative, then all the people are willing to even...
So you're saying land acquisition is not that big a problem. Arun Sharma, come in here. Do you really think that that is not such a big bottleneck in road development in this country? People can be relocated. There just has to be a will to do that in the right manner by the government agencies involved?
No, land acquisition actually remains a big problem. Only what has happened that on the EPC contract or BOQ contract, where a contractor is not very keen, the delays are very high, while in BOT projects where concessionaire also makes his effort, so the problem are resolved faster. But there are major issues in the land acquisitions. One is that we are actually planning in the short term. We had done four laning of GQ very recently in 2005-06 when we are doing 6 laning. Again, we are acquiring land for the same stretches. The process should have been whole to parts. We should have a broad planning where we want to develop national highways and acquire the land in one go, rather than every time we start widening, we acquire land again and divert the utilities again. It's an unnecessary wastage of resources. I think NHAI on recent projects started doing that, where they are acquiring full width and then increasing the median initially and later on planning to widen in the middle. That's a correct step, and I think that if they continue to do so, that will help. The other areas is land acquisition is in the towns and villages, where the existing widths are very low, and acquiring properties is one of the major areas. I think NHAI has to now consider more bypasses rather than acquiring the land in the towns, because there is a greater resistance, and there the major problem starts. The 80% provision in the concession agreement helps, but the balance 10% to 20% is what is stuck in the towns and villages and really difficult to get. I think we need to think in this regard and change the strategy, so that in future at least the land acquisition issues are resolved much faster.
All right. So Mukund's view as well. I mean, is there a solution, Mukund, to this problem? Or in a democracy like ours, federal system like ours, you simply have to plow through when it comes to land acquisition for road development or any infra development?
Basically, idea is very simple, that whatever mechanism we have for deciding the compensation. What I said, that villagers are ready and willing to give their land, because the moment the road is widened in that area, they also have a value addition of their land cost. So as long as the compensation which is being decided and given in proper way, then I think it's okay. It should not have any issues. And I think authorities are looking into this because earlier days the highest deal happened in that area for a year or so. That used to be the base for putting in the compensation. So I believe once you are addressing the compensation part of it, there should not be too much of problem. Roads as such are acceptable to villages, because it creates a value addition for their land. It's adjacent land they are losing. Even the 4-lane facility is coming adjacent to their land. So that brings in value addition to them. So there is a good perception on part of villagers also to understand what sort of value they are going to have tomorrow on their land.
the two sides of the story here, Sabir. Half of the panelists saying that it's not so difficult, even Mr. Praveen Kumar saying that, but then there is a view there that it still remains one of the biggest challenges for infra development like road, or even for, you know, just the basic real estate development. So how is it just a question of compensating them rightly, and you will not have any bottlenecks in
I think there
land
are
acquisition?
many more factors involved. I think most importantly it has to be the political will. There is a complete paralysis. So I don't know what has changed from last year to this year that suddenly we were developing 12 kilometers and suddenly we'll develop 20. I think the government is going slow in every factor. But yes, compensation with respect to new road development does play a role, and the government has to part with a lot of sums of money to get the right land. But what I also don't understand is that if they acquire the land at even 2x of the prices, the whole area land prices multiply, and most of the land is also owned by the government itself. So they will actually benefit if they were more liberal with their acquisition policies and were to part with, you know, some more money, and because the whole area would develop. And we've done a kind of a calculation. If the land goes up from X to 4X with employment generation happening, with roads improving, and with other infrastructure coming in, at least 1X to 2X is attributed to roads. And look at the classical example of Dwarka Expressway. Appreciation has already happened by 90%.
Just in the
anticipation that the expressway will get built out.
All right, so there's a lot that Mr. Praveen Kumar has to deliver when it comes to the Gurgaon and Dwarka market, but we are focusing here on the challenges of road development in India. Financing remains a big challenge. What kind of models work? How do you actually tie up the finances? Who does the work? Does the government just hand out the contracts in an EPC model, or does it get into a public-private participation by private builders? We're going to touch upon all of that when we come back in just a moment. Stay with us. To say that there is a policy paralysis when it comes to road and highway development in India would be, I think, an incorrect statement. Work is in progress, but it's painfully slow and perhaps not efficient compared to the needs of this country and its economy. Let's look at the angle of financing now. There is a road fund which has been created by introducing a 1 rupee a litre cess on diesel and petrol. The revenue from this cess is used for the development and maintenance of national, states and rural roads. In 2000, around 40% of villages in India lacked access to all-weather roads and remained isolated during the monsoon season. To improve rural connectivity, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, that's the Prime Minister's Rural Road Program, a project funded by the central government with the help of the World Bank, was launched to build all-weather roads to connect all habitations with a population of 500 people or above. So money has been allotted, but it's far from enough. The questions that have been raised, Planning Commission report says that the deciding mode of implementation of projects on whether it's BOT, toll-based, BOT annuity-based, or even EPC contract follows a waterfall sequence. This is what results into a lot of delays in implementation on projects. I'm going to get the first view here on this subject matter from Ajay. Ajay, you know, the Planning Commission report says that there is a waterfall effect simply because we are not sure in terms of how to move forward. What model really works when it comes to road development and road construction? Is that correct?
I think there has been a change in the Planning Commission's or the government's way of awarding roads. Rather than it being a waterfall, it is now given concurrently, and depending on the stretch that they are awarding, it could be awarded on BOT toll, on annuity, or on cash contracts. So this has fast-tracked the awarding of stretches, and this has been one change that we've seen in the last 2 to 3 years. Since we are on this issue of public-private participation, we've seen huge amount of traction on the national highways. If I have to just give you a number, from about 40% private participation on national highways about 5 years back, we are seeing somewhere in the region of 70% private participation on national highways. So it's not right to say that private participation hasn't taken place. It has, and it is to a large extent on national highways. If you look at state roads, even there, we've seen good amount of traction. From levels of about 10%, you have private sector participation that has increased close to 20%.
Okay, Russell, what's your own view? You think that government taking care of the entire road development isn't a model which is sustainable in a country like India? The PPP model is just the best way to go ahead. Within the PPP model, what do you choose is again another big question.
I think within the road space, there's a lot of opportunity to use different models, and there's no one model that fits all. The PPP model has been successful to date, but there are a lot of roads still to build, and the example of other countries is certainly that PPP in the models that India are using works successfully in some cases, but not all. So I think it's a horses for courses type arrangement.
Arun, what's your own view in terms of where are the areas where you could see a lot of traction on a BOT toll model versus a BOT annuity model and just a plain EPC kind of a contract? I mean, weigh out these three, just simplify them for us and tell us in what situations do each one of these work?
See, all the three kind of model are required for the country, because for the strategic roads or the feeder roads where the projects which are not viable, the private concessionaires will not come and bid for such projects because they need some returns. They have to take care of the returns on the investment. So such projects have to be done on EPC. The other projects can be either BOT annuity or BOT toll. BOT toll definitely can be done on all the arterial and major highways which are yet to be completed. So there is almost now they are expecting about 50% participation from the private concessionaires and the private funding of such projects. So the country has to continue with all the three models. The Northeast region perhaps is more for EPC model, and then other projects can be on BOT toll or BOT annuity depending upon their viability. And the financials, of course, of late there are issues because of the economy downturn. But if you see the history of the projects in past many years, there are hardly one or two cases where the financial closures have not happened. But of late there are issues of both equity as well as debt. I think the country need to develop further financing structure. At present, almost 100% equity is coming from the concessionaire because the private equity also is drying up. There needs to be financial institutions coming with sub-debts and the equity. And the banks, of course, are shying away from funding of some of the projects because of the nature of the bidding or the viability of the project. But most of the projects they are able to fund.
Right.
And we have recently closed even the biggest project in the country. So
Absolutely.
I think financing should not be a major issue if we take certain steps in right direction.
Okay, so I'm going to come back to financing and go into a little more detail on financial closures of projects, but just sticking in terms of what models work or not, I did catch up with Mr. Upadhyay, with the ministry document also saying that it's not possible to take up the development of major highways on the BOT mode. This was what he said.
We know that the banks have sectoral exposure limits, and they might be stretched. Some banks might say that for road sector exposure they have reached the limits. Now this problem has to be addressed in consultation with the lenders, the Department of Ministry of Finance and concessionaires, and we plan to have a brainstorming session with the top people from financing side, financing industry, concessionaires, including Ministry of Finance, and we are sure that we should be able to find a solution.
All right, so bank funding now, it's coming slow, it's painful. The debt market is not very well developed in this country. Most of the financing from concessionaires and on an equity mode. So this is another thing that's a big concern, a big area of concern, because if you look at any of the listed companies in the business of road construction, almost always you read about how long it takes for financial closure. So that's another question for Mukund Sapre. Why does it take? What are the big hurdles really in financial closures of projects? Is it that bank funding doesn't come through, or is it that the debt market is not well developed?
Actually, again, I would like to ask you to run through a little bit historically on this question because we had been talking of one subject which was like aggressive bidding. But at the same time, if I look maybe 3 months beyond, 3 months earlier to this, then it's very obvious that none of the projects are there which were not financially closed. And this latest phenomenon of talking that people are struggling or concessions are struggling for financially closing, I think emanates out of the aggressive bidding, what is being topped off quite a lot. But again, we still need to see a concrete thing happening that somebody has really failed to financially close the project. And most of the difficult projects also have been financially closed. So there are 2-3 key elements to this. There is a stability, the documents are bankable, which have been tested for many years. Only the new element of that aggressive bidding has come. Now if you try to analyze the bids, what is happening that there is only one critical parameter wherein we are saying what sort of traffic forecast or traffic growth rates have been taken during the concession period. And that's one element which really brings in the difference between various bids which are coming. Otherwise, rest all parameters are almost same assumptions for all concessionaires. So it all depends that how you are quoted for and what cycle of economy is there when you are opening your project to the traffic. And if you are prepared for having those 4 or 5 years of ramp-up period when the economy is in a problem, then you are done with. Then your model is going to sustain. And I think that is what is going to happen. Maybe the future bids which are going to come would still see some more rational bidding than what has happened in maybe last year or so. But still, most of the projects have been financially closed.
Arun, is it correct? I mean, this is something that Russell also spoke about, that intense bidding, competitive bidding, probably overbidding is something which is creating a problem for almost all private players in this country. So what you need is a larger pie, more, let's say, orders of development by NHAI, more tenders.
No, the pie is already become bigger. Last year they awarded almost 7,000 and this year they are planning for 8,000 kilometers of the projects. I think that's not the issue. It was basically what has happened in the recent past is some of the best projects have been come for the bidding, and that's how people have a perception that the bidding has gone overboard. But the projects which are coming now in the last 2-3 months, or the project which will be coming in the coming few months, I think now NHAI is finding there are very few takers and people are not bidding. So it depends on the bankability of the project rather than overbidding or nobody bidding. So the project preparation has to be taken care of. The project has to be viable for the private players. So, and they bid accordingly. It's not that people bid blindly. But on the equity front, I would still suggest there are few measures to be taken. One is the rotation of the equity is very important, because the private players has invested now huge amount in equity in existing projects, and they need to rotate for the bidding for the new projects. The other thing is happening is that the cash is being locked up in the existing project because of the dividend tax issues. And of course, now there is an issue that government is considering only one level of dividend tax, but what perhaps is needed is from SPVs to the holding company, there should not be any dividend tax subject to is being rotated for the new projects. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for the concessionaires to continue for bidding for the new projects and invest without getting returns in short term. All returns are coming only in the long term. So there are some policy initiatives required on the financing of the projects in addition to the debt portion also.
All right. Point taken. You know, we're going to come back and just continue this discussion. We'll go a little bit more micro in terms of the road quality. So from what I'm sensing right now, yes, NHAI is moving reasonably fast enough. Corporate India is happy about it, but it still needs to gather a lot more momentum. But come to your life and my life. Now, a BRIC report says that 1 million cars are added every year in India. And we will have the largest number of cars in the world, 611 million by 2050, with every 6th car being produced in the world meant for India. Now, international experience of roads is way better than what we see as we drive out in our own cars. So what's actually the difference? Is it the quality of construction, which is way lower than what we see in the West or even some of the more developed Asian countries? That's something that's close to your heart and my heart. We'll come back and talk about it. The road development challenge of India, that's what we are discussing today in the big realty debate, because roads are very close to real estate development as a whole, and it affects your life, my life, just everybody's life. You know, there's a KPMG report 2010 which shows the progress on roads has been commendable, yet the country lags behind its Asian peers and global standards by a wide margin. Look at some of these statistics. The average road speed in India has increased to 30 to 40 kilometers per hour. The worldwide average road speed, which includes China, ranges between 60 to 80 kilometers per hour. Four-lane road networks in India have increased to about 7,000 kilometers. China, in comparison, has 34,000 kilometers of equivalent quality four-lane roads. Adjusted for its larger population, India has less than 4 kilometers of roads per 1,000 people, including all its paved and unpaved roads. In terms of high quality, all-season 4 or more lane highways, India has less than 0.07 kilometers of highways per 1,000 people as of 2010. Now, these are one of the lowest road and highway densities in the world. Let's set a context here. United States has 21 kilometers of roads per 1,000 people, while France about 15 kilometers per 1,000 people. And these are mostly paved and high quality in both cases. Russell Waugh, Managing Director, Leighton Wells Fund Contractors, with me here from the Mumbai studio. Russell, the statistics apart, I think what bothers every Indian is just the pure quality of roads that we have. So what is the missing link? Is it that contractors don't deliver on the quality they promise, or it's a fact that we are way behind in technology itself, which could be used in the country vis-a-vis what's happening in the West or in China?
I think there's a number of factors that are relevant. The first I'd probably raise is just skill levels. I think there's been an underinvestment over the years in skilling up the workforce, and that results in limitations on the quality of output product. I think it's an investment and it needs to be made, and that also leads back to ensuring you have the right price for the projects. If the money's available to deliver the projects to the right quality and the standards that are available are enforced, then there's no reason that India shouldn't have the world's best quality roads.
Praveen, you were talking about the fact that, you know, there's even a little bit of technology change could make a lot of difference when it comes to quality. There's just pure bitumen quality, then there's also bitumen rubber, which is something that Huda is very closely looking at, because, you know, you have a road which is overlaid and one monsoon and you have potholes. Why does that happen?
And as your friend has made a very apt remark, he's talking
First of all, people are not even skilled to lay roads.
Yes, the skill development is also a part of upgradation of the technology. For example, if we are planning to build about 270 crores of worth of road in the next year. This is with 2012 and 13. And we are introducing a technology like the rubber crumb based bitumen, which makes for better. You won't have potholes as easily with every rain like you have for pure bitumen.
Right.
And secondly, he's very right on the point that there is something to be done in terms of the contractor being of the right quality. Second, then better supervision and third-party inspections. Because a lot needs to be done at the grassroots level in terms of containing some kind of mischief which is being done in terms of some kind of corruption. Plus, as he has said, a very important part is the money part. If you do not have, because there's a lot of gap has happened over the years. The road infrastructure is gradually falling behind. The demand is increasing and the supply is getting lesser and lesser. So the gap is increasing. To that extent, he's very much right. And we need to have the alternatives also, where the government has money. For example, Haryana government will be spending a lot with public-private partnership. We have a project of 540 crores with DLF, which we are building a 10-kilometer road. Then with other public-private partnerships.
So you're saying that yes, the state governments have the intention. Arun Sharma, you tell us, why can't we deliver the quality of roads that we see internationally? What is the missing link? I mean, Russell and Praveen Kumar say it's just the skilling, it's also the quality of work which is done on ground, or just the sheer gap between what is required and what there is right now in the country.
If you look at the specifications and all, it's all international standards which are being followed in the country. Now again, the workmanship is an issue in some of the road projects which have been done on the BOQ basis. Now we are being proposed on EPC basis. I think the third party supervision is required for the quality purpose on such roads. While if you compare the roads constructed in PPP model, where the concessionaire has to maintain the road for 15 years, 20 years or more, they are more quality conscious, and those roads are actually of the international standards. Though we have some issues on quality of bitumen, because we have only one standard bitumen available throughout the country, irrespective of the temperature range. That I think the new developments are taking place. It may take another 2-3 years where we can have better bitumen quality and variety of bitumen quality for the specific use. The other issue which is very critical is the overloading of the vehicles in the country. Despite Supreme Court ban, the overloading of the trucks is noticed in almost all states of the country, except perhaps Gujarat is implementing very strictly, and you find the damage to the road minimum there. There are provisions for penalizing or charging extra toll for the overloaded vehicle, but unless we stop overloading, we have to unload the excess load and handle that, which is very difficult. It's going to be a real challenge to maintain the road from the required quality, because those roads are not designed for such heavy loads.
Are you doing that in Haryana? Because
I have something
Mr.
to
Sharma
say.
just said that it's only happening in Gujarat.
No, I have something to say on the subject. Actually, we have had a very close look at what people are carrying, what loads are they carrying, and what are the admissible loads on the road. The point is that on all, if you see, you are giving the example of other countries. There, the truckloads there would be 10 times perhaps as high as compared to India. If you have a 40-ton being carried on an Indian road by a truck, I have seen in England or in other places of Europe or in America, truckloads carrying more than 90.
So what's the challenge?
The challenge is better quality of road, not the reduction. Because I am telling you one thing from the
So you're saying
grassroots.
certain quality of roads will not take.
One thing I must tell you, which is the grassroots reality. Of course, the state can and should implement whatever is the norm, but it is also very important to understand what is happening to the person who is driving a truck. He gets money, he obtains a loan from the bank and starts running his business. If he is not viable with a particular amount of load, if he himself gets a broke,
It doesn't make business sense for him.
It doesn't
All
make
right.
business sense for anybody.
Okay, so better quality of roads. Ajay Dsouza, your viewpoint in terms of why India is lacking in quality. Yes, there's some improvement, especially where roads have to be built and maintained by the same operator for 20 years or so. But in most cases, there are stories of corruption. There are stories of how contractors actually pocket. These are, of course, smaller contractors who pocket about 60 to 70%. Even if 25% was pocketed and 75% went into road development, the quality wouldn't be so bad, you think?
Sure. I would say that the fact that we are having more and more projects being awarded on toll and on annuity basis, there is a natural disincentive, meaning there is an incentive to construct better quality roads. You see poor quality in terms of contracts that are handed out on EPC basis. So that is where the disconnect lies. However, having said that, I think at the national highway level, they are trying to implement or give out contracts on OMT, which is basically operate, maintain and transfer basis. I think that's a step in the right direction. I agree that with the person before who said that it makes eminent sense to have better quality bitumen, and that is one thing that is lacking in India because you have only one standard when it comes to bitumen. So I think this is the way I look at the quality of roads.
All right, fair enough. So final viewpoint, hear out Mr. Sapre in terms of why India lags almost every South Asian country in road and infra development, and its record against China looks absolutely dismal, which is what really hurts everybody.
See, actually, we need to put in a comparative table that on what parameters we need to compare. You know, like China, there has been a totally different model. What they are trying to do is that it's being done out of government budgetary supports, and then they're trying to divest and raise capital out of it so that they can take further expansion program. Like we ourselves have taken 149% stake in a Chinese road. So there it's an operating asset. And the value what government also can draw on operating asset is far more better off than a greenfield project being awarded. And if I try to compare with countries like Indonesia or Philippines, or they're still struggling. You know, like Indonesia, the major thing is that they are saying that the land acquisition has to be done by a private party, or rather government will do on behalf of private party with no upper limits on the land acquisition cost. So in this sort of unsought, this is something, you know, unpredictable, can't be predicted, and that's why things have not moved practically in Indonesia or this. So that way, if I compare road sector, I think I think we should feel proud that India has put in some successful approach this, and most of the jobs are being done on a private sector partnership mode, where things have tasted success to that count. Otherwise, there are a lot of failure stories if I put in comparison to South Asian countries and all.
All right, so those in the business believe that yes, there is progress, but of course, all of us who are experiencing Indian roads still see a very, very big gap. In a high-level meeting this week, the Prime Minister pushed for core and infra growth, making it clear that no excuses will be tolerated. The target for highway stretches to be awarded in 2012 and 13 has been set at 9,500 kilometers. We'll come back and focus just a little bit on whether this target will be a hit or a miss. In a high-level meeting this week, the Prime Minister pushed for core and infra growth, making it clear that no excuses will be tolerated. And he set some very interesting targets for highway stretches to be awarded. This is 2012 and 13, 9,500 kilometers. Yet another 4,360 kilometers for road maintenance. So we asked Mr. Upadhyay on how realistic is this target. Can it be met or will it be a miss?
We estimate that about 3,000 of that would be EPC contracts which are cash funded, because the kind of roads which are left now, two-lane roads, they may not be viable on BOT tolls. So we are talking about 3,000 kilometers on EPC cash funded, and we are well funded. NHI is very well funded. Remaining about 6,500 that would go on BOT toll or BOT annuity. Now looking at our last year's achievement, where entire 8,000 kilometers of 62 projects were on PPP mode, BOT toll or BOT annuity. So considering that doing 5,000 kilometers on BOT toll plus another 3,500 on EPC, taking that together, it should be doable.
Okay, so Mr. Upadhyay there, Mr. Sharma is very confident that those targets will be met. But at the start of the debate, you said that yes, we have lagged even that simple target of 20 kilometers a day of new road development, and it will take us time to reach there. What about these targets? You would agree with Mr. Upadhyay?
You're asking me, Manisha?
The targets that we just read for this year, the Prime Minister set out, you think that those are going to be met? There's confidence in the air?
See, the award of 8,000 or 9,500 kilometer project is not the only issue, which perhaps can be achieved, as Mr. Upadhyay said, along with the EPC for 3,500 kilometer, which should be easier to award. But what is required to remove the bottlenecks for the implementation side, which we discussed partially, the land has been one of the issues. The NHA has done decentralization for the implementation purpose. There is a regional office established almost in every region or in some of the states. But they need to be empowered for decision making. There are delays in decision making. There are issues with the land acquisition. and utilities. There are other issues which are coming of late when people's awareness has increased a lot and they are demanding additional facilities along the highways, which are not included in the feasibility report. I think in the feasibility stage, they need to be consulted. Their views are to be taken into account to avoid unnecessary delays, because the new demands are coming up on which the NHAI is not able to take decision for additional cost. So there are many issues. Other issue has been the dispute resolution mechanism. I think one area where we need to again focus is NHAI being the implementer as well as a regulator. Perhaps it will be a right time now to look for a separate regulator on the PPP projects, where implementation and regulator can have a different role rather than have a common agency doing both the role.
I would agree. In fact, Mr. Sharma, you basically said exactly my next question. Does the sector now need an independent regulator? What's your view, Mr. Praveen Kumar? This is something which is the need of the hour, looking at just, sometimes it's perception. The whole sector, it seems, people think, is full of corruption and execution delays.
And he's right, that because if you have too many things coming in, with one agency, then naturally there is a lack of the required standards which are achieved. The point is absolutely taken, and we need to be far more specialized and focused. For example, his point of having a separate cell independently to deal with the problem of land acquisition, and then with the regulation part of it once the contract is awarded and everything is done. So we need to super specialize. It's like a super specialty hospital.
Last word in, Sameer. What do you think? I mean, a regulator always brings in a lot of semblance, or do you think an over-regulated sector, you don't need a regulator? Because here, roads is a state subject, then there is central participation in it, then there are local governing bodies like HUDA involved at every stage. So,
see, I'm always for a regulator. I think that brings in more transparency, there's more accountability. Yes, the regulator needs to be given enough powers to be able to regulate. But I think if a regulator comes in this space, there will be roads will be developed much faster, there'll be much better roads, and I think over a period of time, the maintenance issues with respect to roads will also be soon overcome.
Ajay, your view on an independent regulator and not have NHAI do the job of the regulator as well?
Sure. I seem to concur with the other panelists, which says that it will be better for transparency and faster implementation if we have a separate body doing the regulation part and NHAI acts as the implementing authority. And I think it has worked in many other sectors within the infrastructure space, and it has helped in the faster implementation of projects.
All right, gentlemen, thanks very much. I'm going to start by thanking Arun Kumar Sharma, CEO GMR. Thanks very much, Arun, for making the time here and being patient to go through this entire discussion and debate. Russell Waugh, interesting perspective from you in terms of what India is capable of delivering, not just 20 kilometers a day off-road, but much, much more than that. Praveen, thanks very much for being here. On the ground reality, what's happening, Ajay Dsouza, always with a differing and an interesting point of view. So that's the big road development challenge of this country. In a recent news report, I also read that Japanese businessmen prefer Chennai and Ahmedabad over Bangalore for investment. So remember, lack of good roads, non-availability of roads is a major development hurdle for this country as well. So the faster we get it all together, the better it is for the overall economic growth of this country. Job creation, employment, all of it follows with that economic growth. Thanks very much for joining us on this Realty Debate. The road challenges of India. Yes, work is happening, still painfully slow, but it's becoming better.